Hello, how are you? I'm Matthew, host of Truth from the Booth on Folk Up Radio. Thanks for making space for me and my guest today. There are places you pass through, and then there are places where, if you slow down long enough, the real story begins to reveal itself. Up the highway today to Truro, Nova Scotia, a community at the crossroads of the province, where highways converge, and so do lives. Behind storefronts, along quiet streets, and in the spaces between certainty and survival, people are working every day to keep others safe. David Morse, Executive Assistant with the Truro Housing Outreach Society, joins me by phone today. Together, we'll step inside an emergency shelter, explore the realities facing people without housing, and meet those working tirelessly to respond with compassion and practical support. We'll talk about the pressures of keeping pace with growing demand, the importance of community involvement, and the moments of hope that remind us why this work matters. Because every statistic has a face, every shelter bed has a story, and every conversation brings us a little closer to the truth. My name is Matthew. This is Truth from the Booth. My conversation with David Morse is next on FokedUpRadio.com. Abandonment sleeps first, curled in doorways and policy gaps, while blame walks past with its hands in its pockets, eyes fixed on anywhere but here. The night carries an energy, not hope exactly, more the hum of survival, a fragile current running from breath to breath, from cardboard to concrete. Compassion arrives quietly. It never announces itself. It sounds like a cup of coffee set down without a lecture, a hand up offered, not a handout. Good deeds done in the margins where cameras don't look. Love still lives here, somehow, in shared cigarettes, in names remembered, in the way people watch each other sleep, as if guarding a small, borrowed peace. But everything feels illegal after dark. Existing, resting, being seen. A bench becomes a crime. A tent becomes jail time waiting to happen. Even stillness can be arrested. Death lingers, patient and polite, counting winters, counting overdoses, counting the moments no one made it back by morning. And yet, each day is momentous because survival is not small, because choosing to wake up in a world that keeps walking past you is an act of defiance. This is not failure. This is endurance. This is what it looks like when fragility learns to stand, when love refuses to leave, and when compassion, even cracked and tired, keeps showing up anyway. Okay, David, let's get into this. So I just want to double check. You are the executive assistant at the Truro Housing Outreach Society, yes?
That's right. Yep.
Okay. And thank you for doing this. Can you, before we get into this discussion, can you, according to the Facebook page, this organization has been around for 12 years. Is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
Yeah, in different forms. I think we sort of found our footing as sort of a very prominent, more professionalized organization somewhere sort of 2022. But in some form or another, it's existed since the early 2010s, yeah.
Okay, so if people wanted to do a little more research, what would be the best avenue to do so? Trurohomeless.ca, would that be a good starting point?
Yes, that's our website. Great place to start. Folks can also explore our Facebook or Instagram pages. If you're Googling Truro Homeless, you can look at our website. Our social links are on the website. And if anyone has any questions or concerns they'd like to raise, our contact information is also on our website. That would probably go to me, so they would be contacting me, and I'm happy to address any concerns or questions people have about our services.
Fantastic. Okay. Now, on your Facebook page, there are three things that stand out. You provide emergency shelter, resources, and you do the advocating as well. So if we can just kind of break this down, I would like for you to kind of give us a visual of, if you were to walk me through this facility, who am I going to see? What staff have you surrounded yourself with? And what expertise, what background are they bringing to the people of Truro?
Sure thing. So we'll start talking about our emergency shelter. We actually run sort of two, I would call them buildings. One of them is the shelter, and one is our supportive housing residence. We can talk about that after. But I'll start you off with the shelter because that's what most folks in the community know us, for. So its shelter is a 20-bed shelter. It's a former doctor's office. Actually, my childhood doctor was in that building, so it's kind of interesting to be returning to that space in a different professional capacity in my adult life. But it's 2 floors, so upon entry, you're walking into sort of the foyer space. That is a place where we call them client support workers. We have 2 of them on shift at a time. They are folks who ensure that the shelter space is a healthy, safe environment for everybody who's staying there. They're primarily there to support the folks who are staying there. They do things like provide meals. There's a kitchen there that we cook in. They make sure the space is maintained and clean. And they do, some, relatively sort of light to moderate touch support for, anything that those folks are looking to do in terms of things like paperwork, income supports, any sort of administrative things that they're trying to accomplish while they're in the shelter. But at the front entrance there, we have lockers. Each guest is assigned a locker. We are a low barrier shelter, which means that we don't require that anybody be, sober to have access to the shelter. We have folks at all different stages of recovery or active addiction, and they are permitted to keep, the supplies in those lockers. We do have to, as part of our rule set, search people when they come in. Simply just means we ask them to kind of just show us their pockets. Anything that they're not allowed into the shelter with goes into their locker. And is kept safe there for them. So once you're sort of through that space, you're into our kitchen and sort of eating, gathering space. It's kind of an open concept room there. That's where most folks like to hang out. And that's where meals are served. And, if there's anything going on like games of cards or, a good conversation, it's usually happening in that space. There is an enclosed outdoor deck space off of that sort of dining room area. And so at our previous shelter location, which was sort of more towards the downtown core of Truro, folks who wanted to go outside and smoke had to leave the shelter and then come back in and get searched again, and just to go to get a smoke. So this way, folks don't have to leave the shelter to do that. They can just go out onto our deck, and they don't have to get searched or anything on the way back in. Also, off of that space is what we call our pod room. So the way that our shelter is set up, there are it's not nobody has their own bedroom, so to speak, but it does add a little bit of level of privacy. So our pods are essentially kind of enclosed spaces with an open front where there is a bed, some storage space. They're not all that big, but people can keep a certain amount of belongings in those pods, and they have a curtain to draw across the front. So kind of imagine a bit of a bunk bed setup where there's a bottom row of pods and an upper row of pods. The upper row of pods people can access with like a wooden ladder, and we try to keep anybody with any sort of mobility issues on the bottom row, and anybody who's a bit more spry can sleep on the top row of the pods there. So again, we try and as much as possible give people that sort of respect, dignity, and privacy in that space. It's not necessarily the kind of privacy you get from a bedroom space, but it's better than sleeping in kind of an open cot space where it's just a single sort of room without any privacy. So that's sort of the top level of our shelter. As you proceed to the bottom floor, we do have sort of what we call an overflow room. So there's 16 pods on the upper floor, and there is another room on the lower floor where we sleep 4 people. It is a bit of an open room, but there's only 4 people in that space. And some people enjoy sleeping in that particular environment, and some people prefer the pods. So we, to the extent that we can, we do offer people a bit of a choice. On the lower floor, as well as our sort of office spaces, we do have in those office spaces our sort of housing support workers mainly. Our shelter is a housing focused shelter. So what that means is that we, to the best of our ability, connect folks in the shelter with a caseworker, and that caseworker works with the client to accomplish whatever they need to work on to be rehoused. We don't have any requirement that anybody be in treatment or hit any particular goal before they're housed. We consider everybody to be housing ready immediately, but sometimes folks need help with things like obtaining IDs, or if they would like to access treatment, we do help with that. Medical appointments, anything that people that can be sort of disrupted in the process of homelessness. We would help get folks back on track with a very client focused. It's up to them what they would like to work on, and the main goal at the end of the day is to find them housing, to get back into housing, and so that all happens in the shelter. We do have a bit of a living room space on the bottom floor as well, with a nice big TV. There's video games can play down there as well. And we also have our sort of laundry facilities and shower facilities down there. So just to tack on to the end of my description of the space there, we do offer what we call hospitality nights twice a week, Wednesday nights and Sunday nights. And that's when folks in community can come to the shelter. We keep the shelter guests upstairs. And then we have a separate door people can access the lower floor. So if anybody from community wants to come and have a shower, do the laundry, talk to a caseworker, get a quick bite to eat, they can do that on the lower floor of our shelter twice a week. So that's the shelter space. Obviously, we have more beyond that, but I don't know, Matt, if you have any questions about the shelter.
Well, I'm just curious, how many staff are joining you, and are they local? And any lived experience? Like what's the background of the people that you're surrounding yourself with?
For sure. So, we have quite a number of client support workers. We keep, I think we maybe have 7 or 8 full-time client support workers, but we do have, just as many casuals who fill in when necessary. And we do try and give people adequate hours based on what they're looking for. And so, it's probably, I have a hard time because we're kind of constantly, there's a lot of turnover with the client support workers, so I have a hard time giving you an accurate number of exactly how many, but I think we're up to about 16 or 17 right now, and because we do run 24 hours, so those would be 2 workers on round the clock on 12-hour shifts, 9 to 9 usually, and those folks would, it's pretty much all locals. We don't have anybody. Our service area is not just Truro, but Colchester County and East Hants County in Nova Scotia here. So all of our workers would be from those areas. So they're all from our service area. And in terms of housing support, I believe there are 4 housing support workers plus a supervisor right now. So that would be an additional 5 staff. The client support workers that's like our entry level position, but we would still prefer folks with a background in perhaps social services. We also do look for and try to attract people with lived experience as well. That is definitely important to us, that we, especially at the client support level, I think that in terms of empathy and understanding, lived experience goes a long way towards developing and fostering the kind of environment we would really like to have at the shelter. People with a deeper level of understanding of what the experience of homelessness is like, substance dependency as well, and in terms of housing support, those are case management positions. So again, a social services background is something we would be looking for there, but for example, I actually started as a housing support worker initially with Truro Housing Outreach, and my background was primarily in the mobility sector. So I worked with folks who were in need of equipment like wheelchairs, walkers, scooters, power equipment for their mobility purposes. So, and that was actually in primarily in Vancouver. So I was working on the downtown east side with a lot of occupational therapists with clients who they were serving down there. And so I sort of had some crossover experience, but yeah, we cast a pretty wide net in terms of what we look for in staff, for sure.
Oh, fantastic. Let's quickly talk on the resources. Are the resources that you have enough to keep up with the demand of people who are coming through the doors?
Yeah, I'll be very honest that it's really not. We have a lot of support from the province of Nova Scotia. That's where most of our funding comes from. I think with some budget considerations over the last little bit, our funding has been maintained, but it's pretty flat, and so we're seeing a increased service demand at the same time as our funding is kind of, again, it's steady, but it's not necessarily increasing at the rate with which we sort of see the service demand increase. So we really do try our best. I can point to a great example right now that we have what we call diversion, which is essentially, anything that we can do to help prevent somebody from becoming homeless. So that's if they fall behind on their rent, or they have Nova Scotia power arrears, for example. Or there's a conflict with their landlord. We have staff and services available to help those kind of folks. And between that and the financial support we give people who are trying to move back into housing, so we offer financial support for first month's rent and damage deposit, for example. We've actually burned through pretty much all of our funds for this fiscal already. I think that we'll have to have a discussion with our funders at the province to see if there's the chance for that to be topped up. But I think that speaks to both the level of need, but also how effective we've been, especially over the last, I would say, 8 to 10 months in terms of both rehousing people and keeping people in housing. So it's unfortunate that there's so many people who are having to come to us to just maintain the home that they already have. But at the same time, I do think that we have managed to assist folks who are in very unstable housing situations or are homeless themselves back into stable housing at a very fast rate here. So I have mixed feelings about that. So we've been very successful, but it also speaks to just the massive level of need there is in rural Nova Scotia for those services. So yeah, I did a long way of saying that we could probably have twice the amount of funding and still burn through most of that just to meet the need there is here in Truro.
Yes, that's a very concerning response. You're a great spokesperson for this organization. You're a great spokesperson for the unhoused in Truro. And I thank you again for being on this radio program. What other forms of advocating is the Truro Housing Outreach Society doing?
Yeah, we have a few irons in the fire right now. So I guess I'll sort of take you through some of our bigger picture, higher level sort of thoughts right now. There is a large piece of land that the province owns in Truro, right sort of smack dab in the middle of town, that has recently come up for bid in terms of development. We're very fortunate to have supporters in the provincial government, especially through the Department of Opportunities and Social Development, that are putting a very strong emphasis on affordable housing development around the province and in Truro. And so we are currently looking at developing several partnerships to hopefully be involved as sort of the service provider of choice with whatever development is happening on that sort of parcel of land. And we're talking hundreds of potential units being built on that land. We're really pushing hard to, because from our perspective, we know the solutions that work. It tends to be supportive housing, for example, is a major piece of the puzzle. Housing that is not just affordable, but what we call RGI, or rent geared to income, is really important, so that we're not overburdening people with the cost of rent, even if quote unquote it's affordable, so to speak. So we're really pushing very hard for the inclusion of that in that particular development, because it is a development that's happening at scale, which is really what we need. We need bold moves. So that's sort of one of the things. We're developing some sort of strategic partnerships around that. I host a committee. It's the Interagency Housing and Homelessness Coalition for Truro. So that's bringing together different service providers around the same table to talk about our sort of shared concerns. Not every organization around that table works directly in the homelessness sector, but certainly there's folks like the United Way, for example, John Howard Society, Elizabeth Fry. We all, not only share clients, but have very similar perspectives on how to tackle the problem. So there's some exciting conversations happening with our local partners as well. Really sort of around, I think, deciding as a collective what the problem is and what the most effective interventions are, because we've certainly seen across the country, and including in Truro, a particular approach to things like encampments or street homelessness in general. Interventions that I think people have thought for a long time is, this is just what needs to happen. And unfortunately, what that ends up translating to is a lot of money spent on very ineffective interventions that may make good for PR. They may look good in the newspaper, but they don't necessarily affect the problem or help anybody who's being affected. So we talk a lot about that at that particular committee. On top of that, I think we're just looking as an organization for more opportunities to build our own capacity to perhaps develop more housing. I did mention before, we do run one supportive housing residence that's sort of a bit outside of Truro. That's a residence that currently that is permanent housing for 5 people right now. But we would like to develop more supportive housing, especially targeted towards particular demographics. So one thing that we've been thinking about a lot is the increase in seniors, for example. We're seeing enter homelessness for the first time, and how wonderful it would be to have a supportive housing residence that was specifically geared towards the needs of seniors, that incorporated some wraparound support specifically around things like, medical, having a nurse practitioner come in there once a week, to have people regularly check in if they have any sort of ongoing health issues, mobility issues, things like accessibility are really important in a space like that. So these are all, again, maybe some lofty ideas that we have, but we're taking practical steps towards being able to do that as an organization that is, our size and capacity at current. So, some big ideas, big dreams, but that's the direction I think we need to go in for Truro and for our service area.
Okay, that's just fantastic news. People know that this show originates here in Halifax. For me, I can walk to 2 designated encampments here in the HRM. David, if I'm driving into Truro for the first time and I'm going to spend the day there, what am I going to see? Am I going to see a visible number of unhoused people in the streets of Truro and the suburbs?
It's a very good possibility. It's kind of funny because it shifts by season, right? So, winter time, you're gonna sort of, the way that you see homelessness is a bit different than you would see in the summertime. I think summertime people are a bit more mobile. It's easier to kind of get back into the woods and be a little less noticeable. Truro itself, in terms of like the, I guess we'll call it the sort of, mini metro area, certainly you would see, folks navigating the downtown core who are, I guess, for lack of a better term, visibly homeless. We recently had an encampment clearing a couple of weeks ago, and so I haven't necessarily been updated on where those folks have sort of congregated now, but we have had the experience of some encampments sort of being built up, and trying to navigate that with local authorities, which hasn't necessarily turned out the way that we would prefer, but I think there is a growing understanding on the part of the town, both politically and from the law enforcement perspective, that we can act as a partner to try and mitigate the harms of encampment clearings, or hopefully in the future avoid them altogether, because we know that's something that is a very expensive and ineffective and harmful intervention for the people who it affects. So, I don't know if at this point in time, if you walked into Truro today, if you're going to notice a large congregation of, for example, of an encampment, but certainly, there would be plenty of folks who are forced into situations of having to try and survive outside, or use, I think, the limited resources available for sort of overnight stays. Our shelter is pretty consistently full. We have a wait list that fluctuates from anywhere from 5 to 40 people, depending on the month or the week. And the only other option, if you need a place to stay in Truro, is the Souls Harbor just overnight shelter, which is sort of just a couple blocks away from our shelter. They usually do have room, but again, it's sort of, the accommodations start at about 9 o'clock at night, and you have to sort of be out by 9 o'clock in the morning. So it's not exactly a stable environment for folks. It's really just, I need a roof over my head tonight, and that's the only option available. So homelessness looks like a lot of different things. Homelessness in our area, especially given the demographic shift, looks a lot like people sleeping in their cars. It looks a lot like someone who has just lost their housing but does happen to have some camping supplies. They're going to find a spot that might be out of the way. Encampments are not for everybody. They have some benefits and they have some drawbacks, and so you're going to have a much more diffuse population sleeping rough than perhaps in places like Halifax or Sydney. But at the same time, I'm knowing that we've basically rehoused or have helped keep housing for over 100 people since the beginning of 2026, I think just speaks to the scale of the problem in Truro. So even if it's not immediately visible at the scale of larger urban centers, the problem is here, and we have to make sure that we're making effective interventions and trying to reduce the number of people having to sleep outside.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad that you touched on that positive, just the people that you're helping. I want to get a little more specific in a moment, but I want to let people know, wherever you're listening to this in 162 countries, just do a quick Google Map search and just see where Truro is. There's a lot of forest. It's right off the Trans-Canada Highway. So I think it does have some geographical benefits for people. It's a bus route. Whenever I travel into New Brunswick, I always use Maritime Bus, always going to Truro. So to just kind of change gears here a little bit, you mentioned the people that you're helping. Can you give my audience and myself the very latest success story from the Truro Housing Outreach Society?
Oh gosh. So in my position, I do a lot of basic administrative stuff. So I am pretty much constantly fielding emails, inquiries through our website, phone calls. I would say, without necessarily getting too specific, and again, this is kind of the downside of all of our funding running out, is that, we maybe don't have as many success stories ongoing until that gets topped up. But certainly, it can be as small as, I have $500 of Nova Scotia power arrears. They're threatening to turn off my power. Is there anything you can do? Which is, a fairly straightforward request for us, but amazingly impactful on that individual's particular situation. It can be something as small as that. The biggest success story that I was involved in is there was a lady who was kind of known in Truro as, it was at the time when I was growing up, it was her and her partner. They were both kind of like the homeless people in Truro. And that was, the kind of, it just sort of shows you the shift in scale of the problem, because, at that point in time, you could probably count on one or two hands the amount of people who were sleeping rough in the community. I'm talking maybe like late 90s into the early 2000s. This individual, when I started as a housing support worker, actually ended up with my caseload. So it was just kind of this moment where it was like, oh wow, that's her. and so this was an older lady, had a long history of alcohol dependency, and had pretty much received a no from every government body, institution that we were trying to figure out in terms of her housing, who could provide that, because she really does need, a fairly aggressive amount of support. I, through many phone calls and much persistence, I did arrange for this individual to be housed through the provincial housing agency in Nova Scotia, and in public housing, in seniors housing in particular. I have since handed off that case to a different worker. Obviously, I work in a different capacity with the organization now, but this was a lady who had been chronically homeless for over a decade outside. It just, what that really illustrated to me is that, like, no matter how difficult someone's situation may be, how many people say, well, they're just not ready for housing. I can say that that this client I worked with has been successfully housed since last September. So we're coming up on a year of her being in her apartment, with support from folks like VON. So she has nursing support that's coming in, as well as the sort of wraparound support so we can offer through our organization. So she does have a housing worker who visits her frequently, and even I pop over once in a while if her worker can't make a particular date or appointment. I sometimes do hop in. I like to say hi. So, I mean, again, it's just you can get so many no's. You get so many people who say, there's just nothing we can do. And then, what I've seen is that recovery is possible for anybody. Again, with the appropriate supports, everybody is housing ready. There's no sort of test that people have to take, in terms of, okay, do you deserve housing? Everybody does. And this was such a great example of, like, an entire community convinced this person would never be housed. And sure enough, we're coming up on a year of stable housing for this person. So that's the biggest success story I can think of. I unfortunately am a little far removed from a lot of the casework that's happening now. And for confidentiality purposes, I don't usually get informed of the nitty-gritty details of a lot of cases. But that's the big one for me, Matthew. I think that's what I sort of draw upon for, a lot of my inspiration for the work that we do.
Wonderful. I really appreciate you sharing that story, David. You mentioned a few moments ago that the purse strings of the provincial government, federal government, whoever, is pretty tight. So can you just talk about the importance of donations and community involvement? Are you looking anything specific, asking of the community when it comes to donations, David?
Yes, I mean, we like a lot of nonprofits. We of course do have to lean on donations from time to time. We are very fortunate to have a lot of support from the provincial government, and that is again where the vast majority of our funds for our operations come from. We do run a Canada Helps website, so if you go to canadahelps.ca and simply just search for, I think, Truro Homeless, will pop up to the top of the list there, and you can actually define sort of what aspect of our support services would you like your money to go to. So, for example, if you just want to help us pay for meals at the shelter, there is a sort of a donation bin for that on that website. And if you would like to donate for diversion, for example, so the money that we use to keep people in their current housing, you can do that. So there's different ways of donating that way. We are always looking for more support with our big fundraisers, where I think we are almost a decade consistently leading the coldest night of the year fundraiser for the local area here in Truro. And so that usually happens sometime this past time. It was at the end of February. So that's a big event for us, and we try and draw as many business corporate sponsorships as we possibly can. We also do a big recruiting drive for anybody who wants to sign up a team to walk in that event, which is a massive fundraiser. We usually aim to raise about $30,000. I think we fell just slightly short of that this year. It was my first time running it, and I think we ended up somewhere around 28 or 29,000 for that event there. But that's always sort of our signature event for fundraising. So if anybody is interested in learning more about our fundraising efforts, or would like to discuss perhaps volunteering to help us fundraise, I think one of the things that not just us, but a lot of nonprofits run into is we have these big events, and we like to do more fundraising, but the staff capacity sometimes isn't there. So it's an excellent opportunity if anybody wants to be involved, and it's a relatively minimal time commitment, but it's a way to be to really maximize your impact would be to help us out with some fundraising. We always looking for volunteers to help staff events and stuff like that. So if that's something that anybody's interested in, I would encourage them to visit our website, send us a message through our website or our contact email, which is just the word contact.thos@Trurohomeless.ca.
Okay, thank you, David. Looking at the calendar a little later this month on the 29th, it looks like there's a Landlord meet and greet, East Hants Family Resource Center. Why is that necessary, and what type of outcome are you looking for or expecting?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one where, I sometimes have to keep my personal opinions to myself a lot of the time, in the interest of trying to bring folks together in the same room in a collaborative sense. So that's being spearheaded by our outreach team, which I really haven't talked too much about, so I want to make sure I mention outreach. Our outreach team does pretty much what you think that means, is they are the ones who kind of go out into community, offer the supplies and support to folks who are in for example, sleeping rough or having to sleep in their vehicles, and they also do some case management as well. So they're also sort of housing support workers at the same time. So it's a very, very talented team with a deep skill set that really works to everybody's benefit if they're in need of our services. But yes, that landlord meeting, the basic idea is that in an area like Truro, Colchester County, East Hants County, there's only so much non-market housing. We're always looking for opportunities to expand that. We're obviously working on some longer-term projects to increase the supply of non-market housing, but we really have to rely on, the private real estate market, the private rental market, to house clients. And so, what we always try and do is, get multiple perspectives around the table. We do work with landlords. We never want to ever put a client in a situation where we're setting them up for failure. And what that can mean is developing relationships with landlords. So if there are issues that pop up with someone's tenancy, we can be of assistance. Not to say that we're going to sort of work on a landlord's behalf. We're always going to be supporting our clients, but we can sometimes step in to mediate or mitigate issues that pop up with someone's tenancy, and hopefully keep them housed at the end of the day. That's the ultimate goal. So a conversation like we're having at the end of the month is really focused around areas that we can come together on. I would like to basically come to an agreement that the ultimate goal is successful tenancies for people. We understand the frustrations that landlords can have sometimes with behaviors or issues that pop up with people's tenancies that are disruptive or can be harmful to property. We never want to be ignorant or blind to that side of things. Obviously, our focus is on the client and what they need. But the more we can get these folks in a room, they can get to know us, know that we're not in the business of trying to I don't know what the right word is, but like scam them or work some kind of scheme, just to get people into housing, only for things to fall apart and cause them all sorts of trouble. We want to be an organization, a group of staff that they can contact if they have the need to, and that we can work together on these things, and hopefully just an understanding of our basic outlook and mission. What we try to do, and hopefully recognition on their end that that's an important piece of the puzzle. Obviously our priorities, our incentives are different, but that doesn't necessarily mean there are no spaces in which we can find common ground or collaborate. So that's the basic purpose of that conversation.
Okay. Do you have any type of relationship with Nova Scotia Legal Aid? And the reason I say that, just pulling this off the Facebook page, tenant rates info session, the basics with Nova Scotia Legal Aid. Can you talk about that? Because I'm wondering, I lived 21 years in British Columbia and I knew our tenant rights. And I'm just wondering, do you get a sense that Nova Scotians know what their rights are as tenants?
I would say there is a growing sense that and this is a great credit to Nova Scotia Legal Aid, especially the Dalhousie office, and their efforts. I think there is a growing understanding of tenants' rights in Nova Scotia. I think there are a lot of aspects of tenant landlord legislation and rights that are a bit behind the times for Nova Scotia, for sure. Things like fixed term leases being like the default model for leases, for example, in Nova Scotia is something we'd like to see change. But we have a very open collaborative relationship with Dalhousie Legal Aid Services, their sort of tenants' rights division. And we have facilitated info sessions, mostly out of the Truro Library, for the public. We make sure that all of our clients know about the sessions as well, because the more educated they can be, the better they're going to be able to navigate potential landlord issues, because certainly we have seen fairly consistently tenants end up in situations with landlords or property management firms that are in some sense in abrogation of their rights. I think if people have a better understanding of what landlords and property management firms can and can't do, they'll be better at advocating for themselves. People oftentimes have very little understanding of what a tenancy board is or what it does, and that's part of those sessions, and part of what we try and review with clients regularly is that, okay, if this sort of thing happens, you do have avenues of recourse you can take, and here are some steps you can take as well to ensure that you'll be as successful as possible if you do have to end up at tenancy board with your landlord, for example. So I would say that there's a growing sense that tenants' rights are something that people need to understand. I think we still have a long way to go, and certainly there's plenty of situations that we encounter on a regular basis where tenants' rights are not being respected by the landlords in the situation.
Okay, appreciate the answer. Just a few more moments of your time, David, then I'm going to let you go. On your Facebook page, you do offer drop-in support at the Elmsdale Library, April through June, and I'm just curious, does it not run in the summer months, and will it return in the fall?
I believe it will return. I think right now the teams are in a bit of flux. There's some sort of internal promotion hiring situation, so they're probably trying to get that situation resorted before we post more dates. But yes, that will be an ongoing thing as long as those sort of remain fairly well attended. We also run very similar sessions every single week out of the Truro Library on Thursday mornings at 10:30. You can meet with a housing worker at the Truro Library and talk to them about anything from diversion support, tenancy support, even just have a look on Facebook and Kijiji for apartment postings if anybody is in search of housing. So I believe the Elmsdale Library sessions will continue, and we'll just be posting those dates when the outreach team who operates down there lets us know.
Okay, perfect. One final thing, David, and I want to give you the opportunity to give a shout out to another event that's happening in Truro. It's the People First Truro is inviting the public to the Disability Parade Fun Day, July 17th. The parade starts at 11:30, barbecue, face painting, 12 till 2 at the Truro Civic Square, and a farmer's market. Can you just kind of give that a plug?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, the People First organization reached out to us, and I think a lot of other community organizations with the offer of participating in their event there. So we will be tabling at that event and offering resources and information to the attendees to that event. And we do see the importance of a disability rights perspective in the work that we do. Certainly, we have plenty of clients with mobility issues, cognitive issues. There's a lot of crossover there between disability rights advocacy and advocating for the rights of folks who are homeless or unstably housed. So it just seems like a perfect match. I attended their last planning meeting the other week, and a great group of folks. It should be a really fun event. It's not a long parade from the starting point on Arthur Street there down to Civic Square, but certainly should be very well attended. And there's going to be all sorts of games for kids and engaging activities at Civic Square that afternoon, and highly encourage folks to come out just to scarf down a hot dog, enjoy some games, learn a bit about some community supports, and just have a good time. So it should be a really good event.
Fantastic. It sounds like a wonderful community. David Morse, Executive Assistant with the Truro Housing Outreach Society. I appreciate your time. Thanks for speaking to my audience and, again, just educating people on what's happening, the realities of what's happening in Truro in July of 2026. David, thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. It's been my pleasure. Really nice talking to you.
And now for something completely different. Half of 2026 is already behind us. The easy part isn't what's left on the calendar, it's surviving it. Summer isn't finished yet. July and August will continue to test people with heat, humidity, and the risk of heavy downpours. For those living outside, shade and water can mean the difference between coping and crisis. By September, the Atlantic hurricane season reaches its peak. One storm can change everything. October brings colder nights. Outreach teams begin preparing for another winter as shelters face growing demand. November ushers in freezing temperatures, snow, and icy rain. Every forecast becomes more than small talk. It becomes a matter of survival. Then comes December. Holiday lights fill storefronts while others search for a warm place to sleep. 6 months, that's all that's left in 2026. But for thousands of Canadians living without stable housing, the hardest half of the year is still straight ahead. My name is Matthew. Thanks for sharing space with me and David today. Enjoy the rest of your week. I'll see you back here next Sunday. Let's get you back to the music on Canada's #1 folk station, 99.9 FM, Perth Andover, and folkupradio.com.